Well, hello everybody. In case of everybody, I mean, there's probably four people watching at the moment, but hello to the four of you, and welcome to something that's very new. This is In Pit Lane, the Victory Lap. We're trying this out. This is sort of a Google Hangout that we're going to do after, well, hopefully after each program. We're still messing with the technology at the moment. We're trying to figure out one, how to do or listen, two, how to get people on board. Somehow, by some sort of miracle, Michael Laminato from ABC Grandstand's Box of Neutrals program has managed to break his way through the security and has managed to be sitting out somewhere in his palatial penthouse somewhere. Michael, welcome and congratulations on your success getting through.
Thanks for inviting me, I guess. I don't know, where am I? Am I here? I don't know how this works. It's a bit unusual, but it's good to be somewhere.
Yeah, it's interesting. The technology. It's funny. We were saying just before we came on air. We were saying in trying to get Rob on that we're having to organise this Google Hangout through Facebook because it's the only thing that sort of it seems to be working.
I don't know if that's worked out exactly how they expect, but, whatever makes it work, I think.
Well, I suppose seeing that we're both up and running, we might as well start with the big news at the moment. Well, I suppose it's big news. Luca de Montezemolo for leaving Ferrari. I suppose Monza was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much Formula One to consider everything in Formula One's lens, and I'm sure, I mean, there's no doubt really that Ferrari's poor performance over many years now has contributed to Luca Montezemolo's departure from Ferrari. But also, it must be said that Ferrari, in the grand scheme of things, in terms of being a subsidiary, I guess, or a company inside the Fiat group, has also played a role in this because Luca Montezemolo has been very much against the idea of Ferrari being part of that float or against the idea of floating Ferrari at all, whereas current Fiat management is very much for that kind of thing happening. And I think this has been sort of the logical parting of ways he mentioned in his resignation address for that to happen. They're moving in one direction and he wasn't prepared to go there. So I think this was very much inevitable.
Has there been any talk at this stage, from anybody his replacement might be? Have you heard anything?
Well, he's being replaced by Sergio Marchetto, I think his name is, who used to run Fiat.
Yes.
So he's moving down to Ferrari. The question is who replaces him, and there are also more hypothetical questions, I suppose, about whether or not Marco Mattiacci will remain as the team principal for Ferrari, or whether or not that was kind of like a distraction technique, and maybe he'll move somewhere else inside the Ferrari sort of business or the Fiat business, because of course his background is mostly just in the business side of Ferrari selling road cars in the United States, whereas there are probably some people that might be better suited to running the Ferrari Formula One team. Bob Bell's apparently going to be heading over from Mercedes, and he'd certainly fit. And there's the perpetual rumor that Ross Brawn's only a phone call away. So who knows?
Yeah, I think Ross is going to be busy designing America's Cup yacht somehow. I think that was on the path that for some stage. That's if the America's Cup. I mean, we were going to have another entrance in the America's Cup, and nothing's happened. That's apparently all fallen through. So I don't know what the British challenge is like at the moment, but I suppose that gives Ross something else to play with. He's probably not short of offers and not short of money.
No, I think so. And I mean, I think he's 60 now, so he's sort of getting to the point where he has plenty of money. It's not an issue. He really loves fishing by the sounds of things. He opened the Scottish trout fishing something or other once he retired, so he seems to be enjoying himself there. I don't know. I mean, he's done it once before. He went on a sabbatical between Ferrari and Honda, so it's not out of the question. But I think Ferrari at this stage really ought to be looking forward. I think they've done enough of this sort of looking back thing, and it's not really gotten them anywhere. This conservatism sort of led them to where they are now, which is being beaten by all of their rivals in Formula One. So I think probably be a good move for them to cut from the past and just move on for once.
Yeah, they seem to do this quite regularly. Ferrari. They seem to go through periods of self-destruction, and they reinvent themselves, have a period of great success, and then it's all destroyed again.
Yeah, it's very much highs and lows with Ferrari. I think they'd love some more consistency, but we'll have to wait and see. I think it's very much the Italian kind of thing to do this. I think the biggest problem for them at the moment is the fact that they have probably too many Italians in their ranks at the moment. I mean, their most successful time in recent times has been with, well, Ross Brawn at the head, of course, and Rory Byrne and Michael Schumacher, none of which are Italian. So there's got to be questions raised there as well. Maybe they hadn't fostered their sort of homegrown talent well enough to run the team on their own. And we'll have to wait and see what direction they take now. Hopefully it's not that same kind of idea.
The other thing that's coming out of Formula One at the moment is the rumour that next year there's going to be we're going to lose a couple of teams and we're going to have 3 car teams. Sort of looking at that, I think that's potentially not a bad idea, because when you think of it, I mean, it adds another 3 or 4 hopefully competitive cars and a bit more opportunities for talented young drivers than having sort of the people wallowing around at the back of the field in the Caterhams and the Marushas and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting idea. It does raise a whole lot of issues in Formula One itself. Perhaps it should be thinking about the fact that we could perhaps very readily be about to lose 2 or 3 teams, just simply because they don't have the money. Caterham's problems are pretty well known. We don't know who owns Caterham. They don't want to tell us. And of course, we've just lost Christian Elvers, who only, what was it, 2 months ago, a month ago, joined as team principal, now suddenly has mysteriously left the team.
Yeah, that didn't last long, did it?
No, I think the vibe is when Colin Collis gets involved with something, there's always question marks around how long it's going to last, unfortunately, and definitely involved here in some mysterious capacity, because he's not meant to be involved here. He's an unofficial advisor still, so I don't know what the deal is there. We'll have to wait and see, but there's rumours they'll be done by the end of the year. Marussia, on the other hand, there are rumours that their Russian owner is only going to hang around as long as the Russian Grand Prix, if it happens, and he'll be ready to move out. And we saw Max Chilton very quickly replaced in Belgium, temporarily albeit, with Alexander Rossi, and then shoved back in once presumably the money rocked up. And then Sauber, which is apparently about to be bought out by a clothing brand. It's not the first big clothing brand we'd have had in Formula One, mind you. So there are huge financial questions. And yes, this 8x3 concept, it could be good for the competitiveness, but it's probably not the greatest thing in terms of having that diversity of teams in the sport. I mean, ultimately then you also open yourself to the risk if one of them, say Red Bull, who of course is not a car manufacturer, they're a drinks manufacturer, if they finally decide that the dream's over, that's suddenly a quarter of the grid if they keep Toro Rosso gone in one sort of fell swoop. So there's that as the problem. Competitiveness is a plus side, but I think it's probably a bit against the DNA of Formula One not to have so many people building cars. So I don't know if I'd necessarily be for it.
Yeah, I think that that's been a problem that Bernie Ecclestone sort of flagged years ago. The fact that by moving away into the realm of soft drink manufacturers and even major car companies as well, they're only going to be in Formula One for as long as it suits their marketing purpose. Once they're basically done with it, they're not in it like Ferrari are in it or like Williams are in it, basically for the love of the sport and because that is their business or part of their core business is the racing. Whereas the core business of Red Bull is to make horrible fizzy drinks that give you a headache.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and questions have to be raised though. We only have maybe, what can we say, 3 teams in Formula One, well, 4 I suppose maybe, that really exist to be in Formula One and have no other interest. The rest have sort of been pushed out because, well, they've been priced out, to be totally honest, and in an attempt, I suppose, to lure manufacturers who have more money. But we're seeing a whole lot of manufacturers aren't really that interested in Formula One. They've got a lot going over to Le Mans because, I mean, the regulatory framework is perhaps better for them. It works out more for them. There were rumours that Volkswagen, that whole group, was going to get involved in Formula One if they changed the engine regulations, but that's really not happened. They've said they're not interested. Honda is the one that has rocked up, which is good news for Formula One, but they're the only one at the moment. So I think it really does boil down to the money problem, as always in Formula One. It's just being too expensive for a team to survive and to keep going like this. And then, that asks the question, should we have customer cars? But that, again, just seems sort of anti-Formula One, I think, at the moment. But that's a question that has to ask itself, which route it wants to go down.
We also obviously had on the weekend the Italian Grand Prix. And what strikes me as interesting is the reaction once again to Nico Rosberg from the fans at the end of the race. Like, I could understand in Spa. I mean, it just happened. There's an awful lot of British fans go over to Spa every year, but I was a bit surprised at the sort of the vehement reaction that he got from the Italian fans, despite like trying to suck up to them by speaking in their own language and saying what a great place it was and how thrilled he was to be there. I think that the problem was that he's I don't know why everybody's taken against Nico all of a sudden, and I think we might have lost Michael. I think we have. So, but anyway, so as I said, I don't really understand why that's happened at this stage. So, as I said, with coming from the situation at Spa, plenty of Englishmen there, but it was a racing incident, and I think that he's had certainly there's been all sorts of problems with Nico Rosberg, putting out that video blog that he made where he was saying, I'm so terribly sorry, and it's I feel so terrible, but there we are. I think we might be getting Michael back in just a moment. We'll try and drag him on board. There he is. I think we've got him back. Michael, are you there?
It's happening.
There we are. I think we're back. I think we're back. So anyway, the Nico Rosberg thing. What's your take on why he's so unpopular all of a sudden? No, I think the technology's let us down again. We thought we would try this, see how this Google Hangout thing works, and as you can see, it's not working all that terribly well at the moment. We keep losing Michael, and we can't get Rob at all, or anybody else for that matter. Just to let you know that, of course, In Pit Lane seen every week on Channel 31 here in Melbourne, and today is a bit of a sad day for us at Channel 31. We just got the news today that the government are going to take away the broadcasting licence of Channel 31 and all community television stations at the end of the end of 2015. So somewhat disappointing. The shows like In Pit Lane and Classic Restos and all those sorts of things won't be on anymore. But hopefully there'll be some alternatives. Apparently, there's one of the alternatives is the internet, and we can see how well that's all working out right now. Michael keeps popping up briefly, and then he keeps dropping out again. Let's try it again. We see his smiling face. And now let's try. Hello, Mike. Are you there, Mike? Come in, Michael.
I think I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can now hear you. I can now see you. We'll try this again. This is take 3 on the Nico Rosberg situation. Why is everybody hating poor Nico?
I don't know. Maybe they don't want us to talk about it. It's an interesting situation. I think, as you said, even though he talked to the crowd in Italian, though I do note, I think that got a little bit of a cheer, which is very Italian. It just seems a little bit illogical, doesn't it? I mean, people did the same thing to Sebastian Vettel last year. I mean, there's maybe a little bit more cause for that. I mean, I'm probably against booing regardless, so for me it seems a bit silly. I guess a lot of people really saw his move on Lewis Hamilton as being probably a bit more than it was. It was ultimately a mistake. I mean, people wipe their front noses off other cars all the time. Fernando Alonso did it in the same race as Sebastian Vettel. Because, of course, the chances of that actually resulting in a tyre puncture are remote. You're 9 times out of 10 going to end up as the more damaged car. So it's absurd to think that he did it on purpose. But I suppose that's the prevailing outlook, that move was too aggressive. But that in itself is probably a bit unfair, because Lewis Hamilton is very much the king of aggressive driving. He's the one who shuts the door immediately, whereas Lewis Hamilton, his battles in Bahrain and Spain and the rest, has been very much the one to sort of cede position and make sure they don't crash. So I think it's unfair, but I think that's very much the nature of a really close sort of one-on-one battles. People are going to take sides, and it was spurred on, as you said, by the number of British fans that travelled to Belgium. I do just wonder how long it's going to go on for. I didn't really expect it in Italy, but there you go.
Yeah, I suppose the interesting thing is it's given us that whole new focus on Formula One now. It's, as was mentioned by the guys, by Robert Dahlgren and Steve Richards on the show earlier tonight. It is fabulous for the sport, because that's what we're talking about, the racing now. We're not talking about the ugly noses on the cars or the engine sound. So that's good. Speaking of engine sounds, coming up this weekend is the opening round of Formula E in Beijing, the new all-electric extravaganza, and I'm somewhat cynical about all of this, but what's your day? Are you looking forward to all this?
I kind of am, if for no other reason than it being a new engine formula, a new series. That's kind of exciting, I think. I think, as you detailed earlier on the show, they're Formula Ford speed. They're not hugely quick, but they do have some cool drivers in them. I mean, Jarno Trulli's popped back up. He's on Fox and Neutrals this week, actually, if I can get that plug in there. We had a chat.
Of course you can.
Yeah, well, there you go. It's been done now. And he's pretty keen on the series, obviously, as a team owner and driver. He'd have to be. But it's interesting for the technology's point of view. At the moment, it's not a great showcase for the technology, being reasonably slow and then having to jump out of cars halfway through or twice in the race, I think it is actually, just to finish the race distance. But I think Jean Todt said during this week that a series like this would be a really great driver for a technology that's only sort of been half-heartedly adopted in Formula One. Granted, with the new engine regulations this year, they've sort of taken to it. But I mean, I think if they can make it economically viable, which this season they seem to have done an all right job. We don't know yet, of course. We've got to see how it all gets started. It's not a bad series to have. It's got the green credentials the FIA wants. It's got some good drivers, obviously, so people are interested in it from a driving perspective. And ultimately, even if it's Formula Ford speeds, if you do have guys like Jarno Trulli, Bruno Senna, Karen Chandok, sure they're not Formula One world champions, but nonetheless we know that they're decent drivers. If you got them going against each other, it's probably going to be a fun race to watch.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting if you go to the YouTube page and have a look at the comments. It seems to be getting that audience that they really wanted. There's a lot of people in there who are attacking people like like me, the old farts, and people saying you guys don't understand this. It's not about speed. It's about green technology. It's about saving the planet. And I've never watched motor racing before, but I'm really looking forward to this. This is going to be fantastic. I suppose that but are people going to accept that? Are people going to keep going that if the cars are really slow and if the racing's bad?
Well, that is the question. I mean, when we're chatting to Jarno Trulli, he was pretty quick to emphasise that this isn't Formula One. It is interesting when it started, perhaps because of that sort of green crossover in Formula One going into a similar territory, that people were very quick to liken it to Formula One. I think we've all realised now it's not. It's not that kind of motorsport. But the advantage of it being new is that you don't have any of the hang-ups of the history that Formula. I mean, we're seeing sort of now Formula One grappling with what it wants to be and declining audiences and what rules can it change without ruining the sport. Formula E doesn't have to worry about that. It's going to do whatever it thinks it needs to attract that young motorsport fan that most other categories are struggling to get. So we've got this bizarre, even this is too much for me, this fan boost system where you tweet in and the driver you like gets more power. I don't even know how it's going to work, but apparently they're going to do that.
I noticed.
Actually, someone goes to look it up.
Yeah, I noticed today that Richard Branson is, because Richard Branson's up to his neck in it, as Richard Branson is very good at getting involved in things at the start, getting a year out of them and then moving away after he's milked all the publicity. But he's already on Twitter sort of, trying to gather the votes already, saying, hey, listen, we need to get our drivers up early and start, vote early, vote often.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Aside from the racing aspect of that and how that's going to work out, I'm keen to see how it works out. I still don't know if I like it. It is a really great way to make sure people are engaged on social media. I mean, it's been one of the biggest issues with most motorsport categories is how they engage on the social media platforms. This has it built into the sport. You can't get much more integrated than that. And you do have Richard Branson out there plugging it. That's already probably 100 times more online publicity than Formula One's given itself this year. So on that level, it's going to be a really great kind of experiment, I suppose, to see what can be done and what can't be done, I suppose, in many respects. I suspect we'll find this Formula E season. But I think it's a cool experiment. I'll be interested to see how it goes. And I would like to see it hopefully succeed because eventually technology will get better and we'll have, one distance race where we don't have to change cars. That would be nice.
Yeah, I think it's like someone was saying with the Ziod at Le Mans. They said, oh, big deal, they did a lap, but they said, as they pointed out, with the technology they had last year, they couldn't have done a lap. They might have done half a lap. In the space of a year, they've got a lap. Perhaps if they could come back next year, they might do 2 laps. Then it becomes 4. If they can just double it every year, within 4 or 5 years, it starts to get to the point where they can start to run reasonable stints and they can actually get up and be competitive. And electric cars can be competitive because just recently up in Sydney at the Sydney State Championship, the all-electric Radical, Garth Walden was driving that. It was in the Radical race and he won. They won the thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a new engineering challenge. I mean, when we talk about motorsport engineering, it's, the traditional kind of stuff, what you can get out of engine and aero, but this is a whole new field, really. I mean, electric's been around for ages, but in terms of it being a genuine motorsport competitor, this is reasonably new. So the gains to be had in mastering this technology are huge. So I think over time, and a series like Formula E and all electric cars in other categories, and even Le Mans to a degree, this is going to be huge for engineering, I think. So if the FIA can get on it early, if the category can sort of do the right things, it has huge implications for all forms of motorsport because eventually, they're going to have more and more electricals incorporated in some degree. So it can only be a good thing, I think. And I mean, that's generally the direction that it's all sort of heading in. So why not get on it now?
The interesting thing about Formula E, talking to Professor Simon Watkins at RMIT, he's involved with the e-racer in Formula SAE, and he was saying that from their point of view, they and a lot of the people that they work with are very, very, very interested in Formula E, and would like to perhaps become involved one day if the regulations become a bit looser and they can experiment a little bit more. Because as he said, at the moment, you buy your chassis, you buy your motor, everything is just a control formula. He said when we can start developing our own cars and our own motors and our own ideas, that's when universities like RMIT and their partners will start to get interested.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it has to start off in the most cost-effective way to get it off the ground, but I suspect it won't be too long before that kind of thing starts happening, because there is a whole lot of interest because it is new and because it's a cool thing, I guess, for a university or a company to put their name to, that they're developing competitive electrical engines and renewable technology. I suspect it can't be too long before they do open it up to have some kind of development, and I suspect they probably will keep Aero away from that for the meanwhile, because they don't want it to become a Formula One-esque money pit. They want it to be developed in the right sort of way. And that comes back to the cool thing about having a whole new series. They can kind of do it their own way. So for now, it will be that sort of control formula. But I suspect, yeah, in the future, it shouldn't be too long until we start getting some really good development. We start to see what this sort of technology can do.
Well, just going back onto the local scene now, we had Robert Dahlgren and Steve Richards in on the program. Before we wind up, the Sandown 500 happening this weekend. I mean, putting your Formula One hat aside, I mean, any great interest in what happens on the weekend, and who do you think is going to take this out?
Well, Sandown, I mean, it's getting to that era where, it's all the great races, and without sort of making it sound kind of sad, it's the races that are, they're important because they're the ones that are going to be on free to wear next year.
Yeah.
But it's one of those great weekends. I mean, we're obviously in Melbourne, so it's when it sort of all comes home, and it's the big race, which is for Melbourne anyway. That is that other big race which we talk about in Bathurst. But I mean, it's that kind of buzz that I suppose is always fun. I'll be the first to admit I haven't been a huge follower of V8 Supercars this season. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I tend to go down there for at least one day, and then I'll be sort of set up on Sunday with all my computer screens open and keeping an eye on it. But so I'm looking forward to it in that sense, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of those things that this year I've sort of got more interested. I suppose that the addition of Nissan, Volvo, and Mercedes has really added a lot to it, because it got to the stage there for a while where I really couldn't be bothered, sort of. And I'm just down the road from Sandown, and I really couldn't be bothered. But now I'm really looking forward to this on the weekend, and interested to see particularly how those Volvos go, particularly with Scott McLaughlin there. Gary Rogers has always been good in endurance races. He's got a wonderful knack of just picking the right people and coming up with the right strategies. And look how quickly Volvo was developed when you compare them with Erebus and even Nissan. And Nissan have got a lot of resources behind them. I think they've done brilliantly over at Volvo.
Yeah, I mean, considering, as you said, Nissan has the racing pedigree. I mean, they've had the racing pedigree here before. Erebus has had that kind of weird start to life where they were sort of disowned by Mercedes completely. So I guess we can kind of explain that away a little bit. But Volvo's been such a cool news story, and the brand has been sold really well here, and it is really good to see, because the whole sort of point of the sort of new car sort of framework, the regulations there, was that we were going to have more winners. It was going to stop being just a kind of dichotomy of Holden versus Ford, and we are finally having that delivered. And it is really cool. I don't know. I get excited when I see the Volvo out in front. I don't know why. I'm non-partisan. I'm meant to be non-partisan in motorsport, but it's a cool car to see leading, just to think that it's so new and it's doing a great job.
I remember years ago when the Super 2 were around, I was saying when Peter Brock was in on the show, one of his early appearances, and I was saying to him, I really couldn't see the crowds hanging over the fence at McPhillamy Park screaming Volvo, Volvo. But as he said he said, look, he said, if you've got the right drivers in there and they're putting on a really good show and the cars look good and go fast, eventually people will come across. And I suppose in the years to come, they're not going to necessarily have Holden and Ford to cheer. So it's good to have some other options.
Yeah, exactly. And I think ultimately any fan, any follower of any sport sort of warms to whatever is making it an exciting sport. I mean, you can have Holden and Ford all you like, and if they're making it a good show, then that's great. But if you're having more cars in the mix, and they're doing well and they're shaking things up, and they're doing it in the right way. They're not sort of coming in and being jerks about it or anything like that, which they're obviously not, because then you would not be stupid. I mean, that's exciting for anyone to have that variety and to have sort of a more open competition that I suppose after so many years of just sort of Holden versus Ford makes it unexpected in some regards. Still a little bit novel to see them out the front, and that's always good, and it gets people. It is weird to think that we are cheering for Volvos, but you know what? It's happened. It is exciting, and let's embrace it.
Yeah, well, that's going to be interesting this weekend. I think also it's good to see Steve Richards with Craig Lance. I think if Craig wins this weekend, he'll tie with Brocky on the number of wins for the Sandown 500, or sorry, the lead up to Bathurst, because he won a couple of races when it moved up to Queensland, so that sort of messes that statistic up just a little bit. But look, as I said, tonight was just a bit of an experiment, and if you're watching out there, we've got a couple of people watching. Certainly, if you'd like to see more and you'd like to take part in it yourself, once we figure out how to actually add people to this thing, so we can talk to a few more people, I think it's got a lot of potential. But potential, as they say, is a dangerous word. But Mike, thanks for joining us. Tell us about Box of Neutrals. That's on when that's on. Friday afternoon. So I'm thinking it's Thursday all of a sudden, but it's Friday.
Yeah, I'm a bit like that. It's Friday, 3:30 or 6:30. I don't know why we're on twice, but we are. At Eastern time, if you happen to be watching or listening from any other part of the country or any other part of the world. We've got Jarno Trulli on this week talking about Formula E, because of course the first round is this weekend in Beijing, this Saturday afternoon. And also we'll be wrapping up all of the action from Monza in what was, great to see the title fight sort of get a bit more life into it after it looked like Nico Rosberg might have won the upper hand. Lewis Hamilton's right back in there.
Yeah, also coming up this weekend, apart from Formula E, we've also got a round of the European Le Mans Series. Check out inpitlane.com. We should have live streaming of that over the weekend as well. Usually get that up and running sometime late on Saturday afternoon or early Saturday evening. So that's what's happening next week on In Pit Lane. As I switch, I keep remembering I've got to do the directing myself here. Next week on In Pit Lane, Thomas Randall, Formula 4 driver and sports sedan driver. He's driving his father's rebuilt Saab sports sedan, and that's an absolute weapon, that car, a very competitive car, and that will at least give some, hopefully, a bit of competition to Tony Ricciardello and Darren Hossack coming up at Sandown for the Shannon's Nationals. So that's next week at Wednesday night, 10 o'clock on Channel 31 if you're watching here in Melbourne. And we might do another one of these. We'll see. We'll have a look. We'll get some feedback. We'll see if we can iron out a few of the bugs. If we don't do it next week, we might do it the weekend after, or we may never ever do this again. But if you happen to be watching, thanks for watching, and from Michael and myself, bye for now.